Hi, folks. I think I stand between you and after-party drinks, so I'll stick to 20 minutes or less. For those that have heard of the saying, from pets to cattle, so back in the day when we all talked about servers that we tended for individually, named, and they were all unique and little snowflakes. And we moved to this world of cattle where everything was replaceable and consistent and we had tags instead of names. Well, this talks about IoT. So I guess a DevOps meetup about IoT confused, but there is a wave coming of a need to automate the hell out of IoT. So that's what we're going to talk about. The picture we paint about IoT to ourselves and to customers if you work in this space is it's all beautifully connected, no issues, nothing ever times out, nothing ever gives you the wrong information, or nothing's ever insecure. Absolutely. And this picture is, I think, achievable, but we need a lot of people to get on the same page at the edge. We're talking the hardware at the edge, the connectivity, and it's starting to come. For anyone that follows hardware, there's a whole wave of people announcing small board computers that do amazing things, and the miniaturization of fast chips. All those words I just said are very anti-cloud, aren't they? But there is a reason. So the reality of IoT is this, and in fact it looks a little bit like my plant room at home, where there's a different controller and a different interface and a different connection for every part of my house. I've actually got an air source heat pump, which I know is, trailblazing according to the news, but the boxes that are all hanging off of it are from 3 different vendors. And it somehow works, but it could be a lot better and it could be a lot more secure, for sure. So really quickly about me, my name's Matt. I'm the partner for Storm Reply in the UK. I've been in technology for 22 years. I can feel it, I can tell you that much. And my main focus since its launch has been AWS, which is quite handy because the brand Storm Reply that I work for and head up the UK for is dedicated to Amazon. The reason why is it's great to be able to give people, engineers, architects, a focus and not stress about learning 8 different platforms, which is one of the kind of unique things. We primarily do engineering and architecture, but of course there are other elements like running the actual projects. We build stuff, we migrate stuff, and IoT is probably about 1/3 of our business. And somewhere in the audience just there is Mike, who also specializes in IoT. So just to give you a high level flow of IoT, it on paper is beautifully simple. And then we'll go into some of the things that make it less simple, but also more opportunities. So you typically have an asset, and that could be a washing machine, a telly, a machine on a production line. It could be anything. And they typically talk in a certain protocol, of which there are many, but a lot of them are very old. And we're still dealing with these old protocols that assets, machines, hardware, sensors, talking. It's quite mind-boggling, really. They'll have a load of measurements. So my air source heat pump has measurements, and they're all predefined. Those measurements have a predefined kind of maximum limit, predefined lower limit, and a agreed set point that it runs at. The bit where we get involved in starts at the edge. So I talked about miniaturization. We've started to work out how to get intelligence at the edge. So this is almost server-like behavior in miniaturized compute, which, long story short, knows how to talk to all of those old protocols from the machines. And then the biggest challenge for any company trying to make their product smart is getting it connected to the cloud. Their biggest fear is the data, because people expect things to be smart. They expect all of the costs for it to be smart to be absorbed. If you have a fairly new car, there'll be a SIM hiding in there somewhere on a global contract, probably around 200 meg at the most. It isn't really a Wi-Fi hotspot. It's meant just to let you lock the door, see where it is, and see some basic stuff. We're actually seeing some really sort of infancy of it, purely held back by the means to connect. And then at some point, it's got to get shoved into the cloud, hopefully securely, to give you some kind of meaningful insight or alert. Now, I guess to pause to reflect, and the point we're at now in the world of IoT, despite people talking about Industry 4.0, if you've ever heard that term, it's still really refactoring and shoving stuff on top of other stuff. And eventually, the likes of Siemens, Honeywell, Mitsubishi, Rockwell, if any of these names ring a bell, eventually they're all going to start to bake stuff in, and probably bake stuff in wedded to a particular cloud. It will come. And I'll come on to an example of that in a sec. So the link to the analogy of from cattle to pets is the connection is always completely variable. Most of our projects involve unpicking how these folks are actually talking to their assets, to their thing. There's always a unique process control. And the person that originally came up with it is retired or dead. So we have these horrible jobs of unpicking what we're actually monitoring, what are we trying to achieve through IoT. And there's a named data structure, so we have to unpick that as well. So there is a massive human element to this. Chatting to a couple of you out there earlier, and we've all agreed that technology is not the issue with IoT. In fact, it's really simple. The human part of it, of understanding what we're feeding IoT tech with, is one of the issues. And to feed it, we need a gateway. To feed it, we need some compute. To feed it, we need edge. So the term edge is really established now. It kind of came in without us really noticing, whereas the announcing of cloud was a massive kind of debate. And the edge part is basically bringing everything that we expect from the cloud to the edge and deployable through containerization and other means, which I'll come on to in a sec. The idea is that all of the serverless behavior that you expect in the cloud is now truly available at the edge. And you're probably wondering, like, what profile of hardware are we talking about? Because the edge is always seen as this invisible thing that is hiding in the machinery that it's living in. And that is true. But it's happening, and it's actually deployed in ways that we don't think. If you've been into the London Underground, you might have seen strange boxes on the wall. A lot of them are actually doing people density monitoring. Now, they claim they're not checking your face and doing profile mapping, but they're doing people density and heat density, and it's slowly coming into our smart cities and our smart buildings. But the edge is a big part of that. So there's a whole raft of different formats of this stuff available to play with. And the bit that's the most interesting and the bit that has the most future is the compute on module. Now, this is effectively taking a purpose-built chip and putting it onto a module that works just for your use case. That gets you the smallest miniaturization that you can achieve. But then you start to go up to a world that's available to all of us We can all go and buy a Pi today, and there's actually ruggedized versions of it out there as well, which have been tuned and made really applicable to living either in a car or a factory for high heat and interference. And then the next two really start to enter into the world of servers at the edge. These things can, literally process artificial intelligence with GPU capability. But for it to really work and for it to be everywhere in our world, we need power agnostic devices, which is a great segue to Algae. Now, Algae has actually been proven to power a small board computer for about a year. So they're trying to find lots of different ways of just keeping things autonomously powered. And that's why more and more research is going into alternative power supplies. The use cases for keeping an eye on crop yield or livestock health is huge for some developing countries. If they could just have something that was agnostic in power, solar being an obvious one, maybe not Algae. Being able to achieve something that runs in tough conditions and connect in all sorts of ways. Most of the applications that we've deployed IoT to, it's a complete Faraday cage. For anyone that knows about radio transmissions, very particular requirements that it needs. So there's got to be an option for doing all of this at the edge. And the reason for doing this at the edge is because some use cases are just too much to ship over that gateway that I mentioned before, that everyone is concerned about the cost of data. So if you can imagine a million people over a week going through a train platform, you can't ship all of that to be compute outside of the building. So a lot of it is inferred at the edge, hence the edge. However, we've all got some questions. So how do we manage it? How do we secure it? How do you automate the edge? There's a lot there. And we almost introduce that pet element again, which is lots of individual, unique and tendered pieces of hardware out there in the wild starts to really conflict with the vendors that are supporting the idea of IoT and edge being, a cloud vendor. So being able to automate it is a big question mark. What infrastructure as code tools work with IoT? They're typically native to the cloud vendor that is providing the service linked to them. I can go through an example in a sec. And then how do you cost the edge? Because most use cases, particularly in commercial products, start to enter into this eating into my margin too much territory because of the data required to give a meaningful service. And then the alternative to that is to have something local to your house, which requires the box of wires and rat's nests that no one knows how to manage. So it's a complicated position to be in. And then how do you power it? We need to have more agnostic power for this to be a real thing. So the Amazon lens, for any AWS fans that have downloaded the PowerPoint pack of icons, the bit that we can't really mess with and the bit that we're given in any use case or project, you can't really change the asset. We can't, as a company that we are, we can't start changing the vehicle design of what we're working with to read data from. The protocol, some of those are really ancient. CAN, for example, is originally from Bosch, and any single motor in your car is really being talked to with the CAN bus protocol. And it all makes sense when it lights up the dashboard, and now in modern terms, we're translating that into meaningful stuff on our apps on our phones. The latest thing on here is the Open Platform Communications Foundation. They're really trying to cut through all this old legacy and just give us all an open architecture. But there's some real kind of holder honors out there. The measurements we can't change because they're an inherent part of what the industrial designer for the thing had. So that's kind of out of our control. But the edge piece, and Amazon have a product called Sitewise Edge, and it can infer at the edge. It can structure the data from the assets. And for all of the old school protocols, we can use what's called an input-output server. And we have particularly landed on a company called Inductive Automation, which have a product called Ignition. That's just literally like a Babel fish. If you know what that means, it can just translate all of the communications. Greengrass is where you can go bespoke, deploy it to Reply, have your own gateway doing some connectivity and some compute. And that can scale up to that artificial intelligence GPU number crunching box. Where the game changer is ExpressLink. Now this is a Amazon and ExpressLink kind of mashup. So ExpressLink are the providers of the chip, and it's basically all of the things you need to connect to AWS and send IoT information and do some of the jobs that you would typically deploy to a bespoke piece of compute. It's all baked into a firmware chip. Now the reason why it's a game changer, if you think outside the box, is if you're not scared by designing a board and working out power delivery and security and I/O and placing chips into various parts of a board, the idea is that board designers and companies will pop an ExpressLink chip in. So the Amazon IoT ecosystem in this case will start to become a burnt-in chip. So that's been a real game changer, and the miniaturization of it becomes really huge. You think any format. And then where the main brains are, there's many other services that make up this whole thing, but effectively IoT Core is one of the main ones. And then to make it look pretty, the eye candy, the stuff to make sense of all of this, you will have heard of Grafana. There's now a managed version of it in AWS. It is around $9 per user, as opposed to whatever you would need to power your own deployment of it. QuickSight is really for historical reporting, and simple notification services is an obvious solution for sending out what happens. So there's a wave. The reason for this being part one is because not all of this can be seamlessly automated in the way that we've got used to just talking to infrastructure in the cloud. So the invitation really is, what can we do, a bit like the CLI project. What can we do to build out some of this and make it, more integrated with what we deliver as far as an entire infrastructure ecosystem, particularly if you are in something like Matt's platform engineering and app ops team. There is a new wave and a new need for these types of services. So yes, join me in part two. Because I can, I'm just going to say Reply, which is the group that Storm Reply lives in. We're about 10,000 strong, and the difference between us and, say, a Big Four is privately held, and instead of practices, it's a group of individual companies. So Storm Reply is the company dedicated to Amazon Web Services. If you're familiar with the bands, we're a premier partner, which means lots of competencies, lots of certifications, and also managed services. And this is not a bias IoT creds slide at all. We just happen to come out tops on implementation, industry expertise, and effectiveness. So, it says it there. Hopefully I'm in time, and just want to thank you for coming this evening. Thanks to Linux Recruit for organising everything. A lot does go into it. Thanks to Sainsbury's for hosting us. There's also AV people that have given up their evening as well, although it's probably a job and you enjoy it. So thank you.